the choice of Sochi is the best choice.
That is filth.
Вот у нас олимпийский город, вот, который...
They're going to show us the most expensive ski jump in the world. I've come to Russia to see what the 2014 Winter Olympics in Sochi will look like, because they've already set a record even before they've started. They're going to be the most expensive games in history, clocking in at over $50 billion. To put that into context, the Winter Games in Salt Lake City only cost $2 billion, so this whole event costs about 25 times more than the Winter Olympics 12 years ago. Corruption watchdogs are saying the reason for this is that a lot of it is going into people's pockets. And while some are making big bucks on the Olympics, it's ordinary Russians who end up footing the bill. We're in Moscow, outside the Cosmos Hotel, and like a lot of the crazy futuristic architecture in this city, it was built for the Olympics. But it was built for the 1980s Olympics, which were boycotted by most of the Western world over the Soviet Union's invasion of Afghanistan. I wanted to find out what the legacy of the 1980 Games was, to get an idea of what the 2014 Games might leave in their wake. Back in 1980, the communist leadership was so paranoid of foreigners finding out that the Soviet Union wasn't a paradise, they took special precautions to clear the capital of all undesirable elements.
СССР хотел предстать для внешнего мира как бы страной, в которой все в порядке. И, соответственно, нет людей, которые протестуют, да, потому что если протестуют, значит, что-то не так. Нежелательные элементы вроде нищих проституток, да, которые просто из города выдворялись. Тут довольно сложно искать логику в действиях власти. Они боятся любой неконтролируемой активности. Им гораздо проще действовать на абсолютно пустом, вычищенном, вытоптанном пространстве.
It turns out this kind of thing still happens in Russia. These drifters outside the foreign ministry in central Moscow told me how in 2012 they were told to leave the capital for the presidential elections that brought Vladimir Putin back to office for a third term.
Большинство, как бы, собираются, вот, да, коллективно, да, вот наших бездомных, чтобы, знаешь, показать свой город, чтобы, знаешь, как-то, все в порядке, нет вот бездомных или там, беспредела.
То есть где вы там дают где жить пару дней или просто выкидывают с автобуса и говорят?
Выкидывают, просто предупреждают, чтобы вы исчезали на некоторое время отсюда и говорят. Чувствую, что и Олимпиада такая же будет. Всех бездомных в России будут, ну, как бы, чтобы иностранцы не видели, что в России творится.
The Olympics are actually going to be in the south, in Sochi. But before I can go there, I have to get special permission from the foreign ministry of the Russian Federation. So that's what I'm going to do now before we can head out. So this is the road that goes from the seacoast up to the mountain area where part of the competitions are going to be held, and it's actually one of the most expensive roads in the entire world. This 30-mile stretch cost roughly $10 billion. That's like 1,000 miles of the most expensive interstate in America. It'd get you from New York to Louisiana, roughly. We're on a tour with a bunch of journalists, and they've brought us to the bottom of the mountain. We're about to get on a gondola and ride to the top, where they're going to show us the most expensive ski jump in the world. Well, I don't know how much I want to get on a gondola that may have been built by sheer corruption. The Olympics in Russia are a prestige project for Vladimir Putin because he made a personal visit to Guatemala when they were selecting the venue.
The choice of Sochi is the best choice.
Part of the reason they chose Sochi was because he promised $12 billion, which is more than has ever been spent before. But Russia's actually outdone that figure. The costs have ballooned by about 4 times to $50 billion. That shouldn't be too surprising because in Russia, corruption isn't really a side effect of big spending projects, it's the reason. So the Olympics are actually just a side effect of the corruption.
Это самое крупное преступление за всю историю России. То есть это не просто воровская афера, а это воровская афера, которая крышуется конкретным Путиным для того, чтобы народ не узнал, каким образом разворовали огромные деньги.
Boris Nemtsov is an opposition politician who co-authored a report on corruption and the astronomical cost of the Olympics in Russia. The report compares the cost of setting up the games here to past events. Its findings are that the Russian Olympics cost more than all the previous Winter Olympic Games combined. The reason? Artificially inflated project costs.
На подрядах на Олимпиаде задействованы были друзья Путина. Цена трамплинов, которые они там строили, в 10 раз выше, чем аналогичные трамплины, построенные в Ванкувере, в Солт-Лейк-Сити, в Лилихаммере, в Турине, то есть на других Олимпиадах. Мало того, что смета завышена там была в 6-7 раз, цена выше в 10 раз. Вот они украли столько, сколько обеспечивал жильем миллион человек. Они пытаются народу внушить мысль, что это частные инвестиции. Это абсолютное вранье. Значит, 96% этих огромных денег – это государственные средства. Масштаб хищений совершенно запредельный.
Even Russia's president admits there were cost overruns, but he went on national TV to say it wasn't because of corruption.
Каких-то крупномасштабных коррупционных проявлений в рамках реализации сочинского проекта мы пока не видим. Есть то, о чем я уже сказал. Есть попытки исполнителей, подрядчиков завысить цену. Но это, повторяю еще раз, это во всех странах мира.
So this is what the world's most expensive ski jump looks like. Usually they measure the price of structures like these in terms of how much it costs per spectator. This seat that I'm in for one spectator is worth $36,000, which is fully 10 times more than the average for the ski jumps that were built over the last 10-12 years. I'd probably get bronze though, realistically. The weird thing is the whole time we've been here, the only people we've seen are workers and cops. It's like there's nobody else here. How much better is this ski jump than the one you've got in Canada at Whistler?
I don't know if it is or not. I kind of like the surroundings here, but I also like the surroundings in Vancouver as well.
Really? Because it's 6 times more expensive than that one.
I would put the money into beer myself, but that's just me.
So you think the 6 times more expensive price tag is pretty justified?
Probably be the wrong guy to ask that question.
Luckily, the tour put forward the Olympic venue managers, who were the right guys to ask.
I think we should not compare to the ski jumps in Vancouver due to the fact that Vancouver ski jumps were not equipped with a plastic covering. So definitely here we use the latest technologies.
So it's definitely not anything to do with corruption, because I've read a lot about that in the media.
It's the venue is built on the very difficult terrain, and this is the main part of it. Underneath the ground, there is a lot that was done in order to stabilize the jumps and prevent them from sliding down the hill.
How much did it cost to build this venue?
Cost? Oh, sorry, I don't know cost.
What do you mean?
Cost?
Yeah. You've never Googled it? When Putin announced the games, he said it would only cost 12 billion, and now they've calculated that it's cost over 50 billion, which is 4 times more than even the Russians predicted, and they must have known ahead of time that they would need to build all this new infrastructure.
I don't know about costs, and if you want to know the exactly cost, you can ask the venue owner.
Right.
Of each venue. So this is like just words.
So there's not a huge problem with corruption at these Olympics?
I don't think so, no. Again, define huge problem. I mean, who can define it and who can quantify it?
We, as people?
As people.
I mean,
well,
anyway.
30% of statistics lie.
Yeah.
You know, it just means that statistics is just the way you present it.
Okay.
Any more tricky questions?
The uniqueness of this Olympic Village is the average size of a room is 40 square meters for 2 athletes, which is 3 times more than the International Olympic Committee standards. They're really big.
The Olympic Village cost over $360,000 per athlete to build, which is about twice as much as other Olympics that have happened before.
Whoa! A lot of it's really nice in the sense that there's not architecture and facilities like this most everywhere else in Russia. But at the same time, you kind of end up feeling like the money could have been better spent elsewhere. The UK is a much richer country than Russia, and they spent so much less money on a Summer Olympics back in 2012 because they're going through budgetary crisis right now. But in Russia, there's no problems, according to the government, and so they just pulled out all the stops.
And there are those who feel that the Olympic gravy train whizzed by without making a stop in the city hosting the Games.
The Olympic Games were an incredible opportunity for Russia to present itself on the world stage, capable of hosting a world-class event. Instead, what we've seen in Sochi ahead of the Games is the Russian government's failure to respect basic human rights as it prepares to host the world. We've been documenting human rights concerns, looking at how the Russian government is treating people. We've looked at exploitation of migrant workers, and we've looked at the treatment of people who've been affected by Olympic construction.
Для нашей семьи это был шок, мы кричали, плакали, это все было ужасно, мои дети как бы тоже все это перенесли тяжело. Там было очень истерично, у нас была война, на самом деле война.
А где был ваш дом? Что стоит на его месте?
На его месте стоят очистные сооружения для вокзала Олимпийского.
В качестве компенсации на сегодняшнее число, что вам выдали на руки?
Ничего. По дому и земле ничего. Ничего.
Several thousand families have been relocated to make way for the Olympic venues and infrastructure. We found that there was really not a transparent and fair process for people in getting compensation. A lot of people were relocated to new homes or received financial compensation, but many of them reported problems with the homes that they were moved into, the inadequate construction, and the compensation, cash compensation that most people received really didn't allow them to buy anything similar to what they had been moved out of. A lot of them continue to fight in the courts for their rights.
This building is an old Soviet-era state-owned farm that's now going bankrupt. It's really close to the Olympic Village, but the residents here are angry because the government doesn't want to register them as residents. Because if they did, when this is torn down and replaced by a 5-star hotel, they would have to provide them with proper apartments to live in.
Мы здесь живем 7 человек. Папа, мама, брат, сестра, я и 2 моих детей. Ну, как у нас идет, да, вроде говорят, то, что под снос идет, должны, по идее, как сказали, будут квартиры на каждую семью давать. А сейчас, так как у нас соцнайма нету, нас можем на улице, короче, остаться.
It's like, I don't know, it's barely 20 square feet in here. There's basically a little fold-out chair and a fold-out couch, and the whole family sleeps together in here, and then a couple more people sleep on this couch here. Like 7 people in this room. And the guy from the Olympic Committee at the Olympic Village is bragging how they're giving 40 square meters to each of the athletes and how they're going to have more room than anybody else at any previous Olympics in the world. And they spend all that money on the Olympics and they can't even take care of their own citizens. They don't care about the people living right next door.
Это же вообще лицо наше, нашей нации всей, нашей России всей, жемчужина России называется. Море, вот оно рядом, рядом отели. И рядом такая, посмотрите, глаза не смотрят, и мне слова не находится сказать на такое все.
Вот такие у нас ситуации, потому что безвыходная ситуация. Как бы денег, чтобы купить что-то квартиру, заработать сейчас таких нету. Представьте, туалета нет. Но сейчас нам вот поставили там туалет на улице, где-то метров, наверное, может 30. Тут сейчас, чтобы у нас здесь гастарбайтеры, разные бичи не ходили в туалет, люди повесили замочки. Вот. Обычный туалет, без унитазов, без ничего. таких мы условиях живем.
It's not quite as nice as the one we saw at the Olympic Village, but those pits are actually an improvement on what they had before, so it's not like the government hasn't done anything for these people. These were the outhouses they used to use.
Туда лучше не ходить.
She says it's better for us not to go in there. Should we risk it?
Вот у нас олимпийский город, вот который.
That is filth. Тут условия вот такие примитивные, а вы за это держитесь. Почему?
А нам некуда идти, понимаете? Нам другого жилья у нас просто-напросто нет.
Это как-то все, то, что это происходит сейчас, как-то связано с Олимпиадой?
Ну, я думаю, что да, потому что земли-то изъяли у совхоза. Здесь вот, где сейчас вот стоит многоэтажная гостиница пятизвездочная, здесь была ферма. Мы работали, выращивание сельскохозяйственных овощей, баклажан, перец, кабачки, картофель выращивали. Все это закрылось, начали потихоньку сокращать земли, то есть под олимпийские нужды, под каток, под самые здания.
И вы считаете, что это несправедливо?
Ну, конечно, несправедливо. У нас же родители здесь работали, родители уже старые, уже как бы мы работали, и в результате мы прожили здесь 20 лет. И что теперь?
The Olympic officials in Russia say that the reason the Olympics are so expensive here is because they had to build a lot of this infrastructure from scratch. And I think it's great that Russia gets a brand new ski resort and all these roads that look like they could be in Switzerland. But when you realize that $30 billion of the $50 billion price tag for these Olympics were spent on corruption, you think about all the roads and schools and hospitals and whatever else could have been built with all of the money that was dumped here.
But the really sad thing is that even if the money had been spent elsewhere in Russia, it would have been squandered just as thoroughly. So might as well stop worrying, sit back, relax, and let the games begin.